movie I really enjoyed, but had some issues. Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs.
Indeed.
I mean, I just want to preface this. I am like very pro dog. I would have been pro dog party for sure. I would have been up there with Tracy leading the charge. This is Wes Anderson's what?
Ninth.
Ninth. I was gonna say 10th, ninth movie. Probably near the lower end in a lot of people's lists, but still, Wes Anderson movies are a class act in filmmaking almost every single time. Did you like this movie?
Oh yeah, no, I really enjoyed Isle of Dogs. I've seen 6 of his movies. I haven't seen Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, which I know people love, and The Darjeeling Limited. I haven't seen those 3, but yeah, no, I did really enjoy it. We tweeted a poll about our favorite Wes Anderson movies at Nostalgia Pod. So if you missed that poll, make sure you follow the count on Twitter so you don't miss it next time.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I think this is definitely towards the top for me. And I mean, Wes Anderson, if you don't know, he's like the auteur's auteur, right? Only one of his movies is even an adaptation. Fantastic Mr. Fox, everything's original.
Mm-hmm.
And his cinematography is so iconic just because it's so unique. It so stands out, right? You know, all the big wide shot pans and just kind of like the artistic colors that he uses. Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, critiques of him would say that he's overly indulgent in his storytelling and, you know, kind of pretentious at times, which I totally get. And I agree with in some movies for sure. But, you know, Isle of Dogs, his second stop motion movie, you know, I was expecting a lot from it. And I actually, you know, I do think it delivered just, you know, in terms of the movie front, because I was really impressed with the world building of this movie, the fictional Japan that it establishes. I was really impressed with, because I know I'm going to like the cinematography. I know I'm going to like all of his freaking collaborators that are providing the voices. Right. I know all that already.
Yeah.
But you know, and I know his stories are going to be kind of weird, but the world building really stood out to me, and you know, I was totally engrossed. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, the thing that I think I enjoy most about Wes Anderson films, I mean, he does a lot of things really well. Like you already mentioned, he does beautiful set design, he does beautiful framing of his shots, and just the way he writes is really well done. But he does these really like small emotional moments really well. Like you think about the Royal Tenenbaums, you know, a movie where you're looking at this very dysfunctional family, and there's some very dramatic things that happen, and probably the scene that, or the moment of the movie that hits me hardest emotionally, is at the end when Ben Stiller goes up to Royal Tenenbaum and goes, "It's been a hard year, Dad." And just like that moment holds so much emotional weight, but like it's built up by everything else that happens in the movie and everything else they explain. And like that, I had that same feeling when, you know, I guess spoiler alert, when Atari goes to the chief and says good boy and gives him a bath, and like he finally plays fetch with him. Like he has these moments in these stories, and he does that, I think, so well, that hold a lot of weight but aren't like huge, you know, in a sense. I also think the thing I really enjoyed about this movie in particular was, and we're going to talk about the issues of this, but it also explored like a different setting than he's had. I mean, the Darjeeling one was set in India, I believe, right? And that explored that culture, but more from the perspective of like how it enlightens white people. And Tracy's character is problematic in ways that we're going to get to at the end of this discussion. But I just thought, you know, it was very interesting to like the sushi scene, like when he's making the sushi, was fucking mesmerizing. Like only Wes Anderson does that. So I enjoyed the film a lot, and I also thought he infused humor really well. Like every time the dog sneezed, I was like, I giggled. It's just funny. Or like Jeff Goldblum's dog. I forgot which dog he played.
One of the crew.
Yeah. How he always kept talking about, oh, have you heard the rumor about this? Like, just it was just a funny running bit. So.
I like the bit where Ed Norton's dog was, all right, let's put it to a vote.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Who wants to vote Chief out of the group? Yeah, no, it was, and also just like the inventiveness of it. Like, who would think to like make a movie about like exiling dogs, and then like making it so that you don't understand everything the humans say, but you're getting it totally from the dog's perspective, but also
Right.
like pull that off in a way that's not like super campy or stupid. I don't know. Um, where does this rank for you in the Wes Anderson films
Good question. Mm, prob of the one
that you've seen?
of the six I've seen, I probably have it third
Yeah, I think
after Grand Budapest and The Royalty.
yeah, I think I have Royal Tenenbaums, Grand Budapest, and Fantastic Mr. Fox
Sure.
ahead of it. Life Aquatics close, and then yeah, it's somewhere around there in the middle. It's not his best, but it's up there. Um, before we move on to the discussion about the problematic parts of it, was there anything else you wanted to highlight?
Uh, I thought some of the newcomers to the cast were great additions. Courtney B. Vance as
Yeah.
the narrator. Obviously, he's got a really strong, rich voice, and it was
Mhm.
perfect guy. Greta Gerwig, who is someone
Yeah.
you on the surface you would assume had already worked with Wes Anderson, but this is actually her first film. She did good job as well, and even Yoko Ono, her first time playing a character named Yoko Ono, which was odd, but
Mhm.
I thought they were nice additions to his rotating group of people he always works with. I mean, this is Bill Murray's eighth Wes Anderson film. The only one he didn't do was the first one, Bottle Rocket.
Mhm.
Jason Schwartzman, this is his sixth one. He only was a writer this time around,
Yep.
but pretty impressive.
Who was your favorite dog or your favorite voice performance?
Oh, a good question. Yeah, I thought so. Bryan Cranston, I thought was great. I thought Liv Schreiber was
Fantastic.
great as well.
Mhm.
And Ed Norton, I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
But I think Cranston. I think Cranston's really does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Oh yeah.
I would guess he has the most lines. Um, but yeah, I was really impressed with him.
Yeah. Cranston's such an amazing story, just like as a side note. Like
Sure.
someone who did like all these bit roles through the 90s and just really kept sticking with acting. Did Malcolm in the Middle and then
Right.
gets fucking Breaking Bad and now he's everywhere and
Mhm.
such a talent and such a joy. Yeah, he was great as Chief. I also thought Tilda Swinton as Oracle was just
Oh right. Yeah.
everything I wanted from that, and like that as a infusion of humor was also just hilarious. Um, which dog would you be from the group?
Oh, that's funny. Oh, I don't know. Uh, Probably Ed Norton.
Yeah, I feel like I'd probably be Ed Norton's character as well. I could see myself maybe being Boss, Bill Murray's character too. He seems to have a soft side to him.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so why don't we jump into this discussion now? Because while Wes Anderson made a film that you and I both enjoyed, there's been a lot of talk about the role that Japanese culture plays into the movie. Why don't you give us a little breakdown of what people have been having issues with that?
Yeah. So a lot of people. I mean, this is definitely an observation that was coming from critics of color that are, I think, naturally just more adept to see these problems, right away.
Mhm.
But a lot of people, and this is also coming from Asian Americans specifically watching the movie here in America. But the general gist of it is that Isle of Dogs really doesn't require the story does not require itself to be set in Japan. It's kind of just set in Japan because Wes Anderson is a big fan of Japanese cinema. He's
Mhm.
openly talked about his love of Miyazaki and Kurosawa. Um, and this is kind of his in his mind, this is a homage to that, right? But
Mhm.
the critiques which I do think there's a lot of merit to what these are saying, but the mileage of whether that impacts your enjoyment in the movie really depends on the person, I guess. But you know, it's kind of like cultural tourism in the sense that it's just kind of going to Japan, and this again, it's a fictional version of Japan. Nagasaki City is not a real place, of course, and it's sent
Right.
20 years in the future, as Courtney B. Vance told us. But um, the dogs, and they give you this with text in the beginning. The dogs speak dog; they're barking, but
Yep.
for our viewing pleasure, it's being automatically transcribed into English.
Mhm.
But there's no subtitles for the Japanese speakers. There's only a translation when it's convenient, when there's a TV translator there, giving it to us in English, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of where a lot of it's coming into, where the Japanese people are kind of the sideshow in their own story.
Right.
And yes, you could retort, but it's just dogs, but it's dogs voiced by white people, right?
Mhm.
And it's I it's tough because it's really is hard too because Asian cultures have long been stereotyped in Hollywood. Um, watch a movie like 16 Candles. There's
Yeah.
just characters that are just blatant stereotypes, and it's played for laughs. And the fetishization of Asian culture in this case, where Wes Anderson clearly doesn't mean anything bad by this.
Mhm.
And I think the people that are being, more kind to him are just saying that, just being tone deaf about how this would go and make people feel.
Right.
It's not an obvious blatant ripping off. It's not a cultural appropriation, right?
Yep.
In that sense, it's just kind of him not understanding the issues with it. But I saw a quote, or rather a long tweet from someone who just not a verified account or anything, just a Asian American guy who saw the movie, and he saw it at the ArcLight in LA, right?
Mhm.
And he said, I expected the movie to love Japan and hate Japanese people. That's just how artsy white men operate. And I'm like, all right, kind of makes sense. And the hipster uh, critique that's always lobbed at Wes Anderson, hipster culture has long been criticized for just kind of taking things from other people and just using it
Right.
and right.
Yeah.
But the next part of his quote, I did not expect to hear roaring laughter to the equivalent of a ching chong joke. I did not expect snickering during regular Japanese conversation, yet there it was. And I do think that the Japanese language is kind of played for laughs at point because we don't get the translation. And,
Mhm.
there's a lot there. I don't think it's totally baseless.
No, yeah, I don't think it's baseless. I think I it's hard for me to remember. I don't remember any times I laughed at like the language, but I remember times when they wouldn't translate, but something would be happening in the background. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things Wes Anderson does a lot is that when someone's talking, it's not just like they're talking. There are things happening around them. Like, like the Atari could have been giving a monologue, and one of the dogs is like I don't know, like scratching itself or like sneezing or something like that, and I think at that point it can become a little muddy. But I think definitely another thing that we talk about people getting these roles like Yoko Ono is I think a great casting because that's an Asian person, Asian American now, who is filling one of these roles and did it greatly. And Atari's character is a Japanese actor, and I believe the person who played the mayor and the person who played like the news person on TV was also Japanese. But yeah, the dog roles were played by all white Americans except for Courtney B. Vance,
Right.
um, and it is problematic to be representing this culture, but not necessarily having actors who are also
Mm-hmm.
doing that. Although it makes me feel better. Wes Anderson did have a Japanese person writing this with him and working
Right.
on the dialogue and trying to get most of that right. Um, I actually thought Tracy's character was a little bit more
Yeah.
egregious and the role
Nuts.
that she played in the movie, in terms of going against culture. So Tracy is this. For those who haven't seen the movie, she's this senior in high school. She's a study abroad student from Cincinnati, Ohio, who basically at the end like puts together the whole conspiracy against killing the dogs and saves the dogs in a way.
She's literally a white savior,
Yeah, I mean,
saving the foreigners. Like,
yeah,
she's Matt Damon in The Great Wall.
yeah. And the thing is, and I've said I'm not a huge anime culture person, but in doing some reading around this, it's my understanding that like her character is something that is portrayed a lot in anime culture, which is like this brash, outspoken, American study abroad student or American who's in the story. But being the actual savior of it is definitely problematic, especially because I think there's a case to be made that you could have written her character out completely.
Yeah. Well,
So,
it really hurts Atari. Like, Atari kind of takes
right.
the back seat in the second half of the movie, and as the main non-dog lead initially,
Mhm.
it's an interesting choice.
Yeah, and especially because they kind of framed it as Atari was second coming of this great Japanese myth
Right.
about the boy who saved the dogs in the beginning, and then you have the American white female save. It just felt like you had it all right there already. Like you didn't necessarily need to have this happen, but it's not perfect, and I think this is a problem that isn't going to be solved anytime soon, but I think just the fact that there were steps taken in this movie to try to be respectful of the culture, to try to make the dialogue correct. From what I read, the dialogue is close, if choppy at points, but it's close to what's actually like it makes sense. So
Mhm.
that's good. And it's not just like they're throwing like gibberish words or throwing gibberish sentences together. So um, Wes Anderson got to be a little bit better there, but I'm not gonna knock him too much. I think it's admirable that he tries to explore these cultures, although it needs to get a little bit better about how he does it moving forward.